Hi everyone, it's Jason from TSquare Racing, here today to talk about simulators. As we film this, we're still under the stay-at-home orders that it seems like the whole world is under right now. And if you're watching this in the distant future and don't know what I'm talking about, just Google 2020 and everything is terrible. YouTube has been known to pull down videos that mention certain keywords, so if you're wondering why I'm not saying the C or the V words, that's why. But, you know, we all know what I'm talking about. Regardless, during this time, there is no racing going on anywhere, at least not in the real world. So to satiate our need for speed, many racers are turning to virtual racing simulators like iRacing. And we've seen it in NASCAR, IndyCar, USAC, IMSA, SCCA, and some others. I think even NASA has one now. And a lot of them are using iRacing to put on virtual races, even some that are nationally televised. And this is driving up a lot of interest from fans in virtual racing, and specifically iRacing. No longer just a video game, simulators have become an integral part of race driver training in recent years, with simulator training centers like Racecraft 1 here in Indianapolis starting to pop up and serving both amateurs and pro racers alike. iRacing is not the only software out there, but it has become the most well-known package that's available and used by a lot of the pro racers. It's a cool tool where you can get online and sometimes race with the pros if you're lucky enough to jump in on the right event. There are other software packages like Grid, Forza, the F1 series. Some people play the Gran Turismo video games. Maybe not as realistic as things like iRacing, but still do a pretty good approximation of a virtual racing experience. So if you're interested in checking any of the other tools out, go check those out, but we're mainly going to be focusing on iRacing today since that's what's drawing most of the interest right now. Before we go any further though, if you find this video helpful, please remember to hit the like button and please subscribe to our channel. We have lots of helpful videos like this. If you're a aspiring racer, we have an entire playlist. I will put the link to the playlist right up here. It's got lots of helpful videos about how to help get your career started and work on some of the things that you need to do to advance. But personally, I began using iRacing to help other drivers practice when they wanted to get ready for an event or a test session. I would hop online to give them some competition to race against. Of course, now iRacing lets you do virtual races with AI competition, but it's always nice to have actual human competitors in there racing with you. Later on, I adopted it from my own training when I was getting ready to run an endurance race in Indianapolis. I was unable to get any track time, either in the car or on the track, prior to race day. The team was based on the West Coast, and Indianapolis Motor Speedway just doesn't let you go out and run practice. It's very, very expensive to get any track time there. So I relied on iRacing to figure out everything I needed to do in the car before I got there. And it was things like getting my shift points right, what gear do I need to be in, and when do I need to shift, where do I need to brake, where's my acceleration zones, where's the correct place to apex on every corner, things like that. And I was able to do that in iRacing. And then on race day, when I hopped in the car during the race, I didn't even get pace laps because I was the one of the middle drivers in the roster that day. So when I got in the car, it was green flag go, and everything still felt quite familiar, even though I'd never been on the track or in that car before. It still felt like I did it before because the simulator had prepared me, and the braking zones were exactly where they had been in the simulator. The shifting was exactly the way it had been in the simulator. The line was exactly where I expected it to be. So it ended up being really, really good. And honestly, I can't imagine getting in that car and going flat out on my first lap had I not had practice in the simulator. I just would have been having to take it easy to figure out the car, and it might have taken me several laps to get comfortable, and instead on lap number 1 I was able to go hard right away. In the midst of the growing popularity of simulator racing, I've been having a lot of conversations with people on social media about how they get started with iRacing, what kind of computer they need to run or to have to run it. They've asked me about actual rigs. They've seen a lot of fancy rigs on television. Some of those can be, I've seen some that are $20,000, $50,000, the things that we see that the pro teams drive. You know, I'm not even going to talk about the fancy ones that the manufacturers have, or that, say, Formula One teams have, but just what, you know, the type of simulator that a pro driver might have in his house. Depending on the driver, he might have a $20,000 rig in his house, something like a SimCraft type system, but you don't need to get one that's that expensive. A recent NASCAR iRacing event was won by somebody with a driver, or I'm sorry, with a wheel clamped to his desk and just sitting in an office chair. So you don't need anything like that to get started. You can get started for, you know, a few $100s, you know, rather than a few $1,000s. So, but it's as much as you want to spend. If you really want to go out there and drop 10 grand, you won't have any trouble doing it. There's plenty of companies out there that will sell you equipment at that price point, and it's pretty amazing stuff that'll get into the motion simulation and things like that. But you don't need that right away. You can start pretty cheap, and we're going to kind of show you sort of the tiers and what you can start with, and then as you want to spend more money, what a $50 system might look like, a $100 system, a $500 system, and then, you know, even getting up into the more expensive add-ons into the thousands. So we'll walk you through that, and that's what this video is going to be. First, we'll talk about the software. We'll focus on iRacing since it's the most popular, but as we mentioned, there are other options out there for PC and gaming console-based driving simulators. The folks at iRacing list the following as their minimum system requirements for running on a Windows PC. I know this is a lot of text and probably pretty small if you're watching this video on a small mobile phone, so please feel free to pause and screenshot this information so that you can look at it later. And same on the other slides we'll show, because we're going to show a few of these with all the different specifications on them as we go along. Now, I should point out that I'm currently running iRacing on a computer that doesn't meet all of these specifications. The iRacing website does have a tool. There's a little button you can click on, and it will analyze your hardware, and it will tell you whether or not your hardware meets the minimum requirements. I ran that test on my computer. It's an older computer. I've had it since about 2012, 2013. It's 2020 now as I'm filming this video. It still runs it pretty well, but it doesn't meet all the specs. It's not running Windows 10. It doesn't have as good a video card. So you may have to turn some settings down, but I can tell you right now, even with the machine I have that's not running quite to that spec, it still runs pretty good, and it's still a great tool. And I don't really notice anything wrong with it. It doesn't look that different from what you see on television when you see these televised races. If you're using an Apple computer, you can still run iRacing, but you'll need Apple's Boot Camp utility in order to run a Windows environment to do it. Next, you'll need something to control your virtual race car. You don't need a full cockpit to start. In fact, if you already have a PlayStation or Xbox, your existing controllers might work just fine. Other controllers, such as regular joysticks, are also compatible. I grew up playing the old Sierra NASCAR games on my home computer with a Logitech flight stick. It took a little getting used to, but it worked. If you do want to use an actual wheel, there's many inexpensive PC and console wheels available that will work. Some have pedals, but many also have controls on the wheel for accelerating or braking, such as a second set of paddles next to the shift paddles. For a bit more money, you can also get one that is a force feedback wheel or that provides resistance in the pedals. These obviously give you a little bit more realistic experience. Less expensive systems will use a belt-driven motor for the force feedback in the wheel. More professional systems will use a direct drive system that's just capable of giving you a little bit more force, a little bit more resistance. I like, when I have the opportunity to use a direct drive force feedback wheel, if I'm using a professional system, I really like to crank it up and give myself a heavy wheel that puts a lot of resistance on. It's just good practice. Even if you're driving a race car that's got power steering, I like a heavier wheel personally because I think you get more information from the car through the wheel. It feels less like you're playing a video game. So if you can make your video game feel more like the real world by getting a better force feedback system, I think that gives you just that much more feedback from the car, even the virtual car, that's very important to you as a driver. So I like a heavy wheel. So if you can afford a direct drive force feedback system, that's the way to go. A lot of those systems also allow you to swap out wheels. So if you want to switch from a Formula One style wheel or to like a larger radius NASCAR wheel, they'll give you the option. And the companies that make actual racing wheels, I know MPI, Max Pappas Incorporated, they also make wheels for simulators, but they also make adapters so that you can use regular race car wheels with a simulator setup. And I think other companies do that as well. I don't want to name any in case I'm wrong, but I believe there are other companies out there that do that as well. And you know, like I said, you can get Thrustmaster systems that I think have different wheel options as well if you just want to stay within the gaming realm. A great option actually is the Logitech G29 G920 series wheel, pedal, and shifter combo. If you want something that's a good entry-level system but gives you a lot of the capabilities of the professional systems. We actually have a version of these controls on our setup. It's a little bit older version, but it's essentially the same thing. It's very common as an entry-level system that I've even seen on some professional drivers' rigs when they've televised iRacing events. I definitely have seen NASCAR drivers with essentially the same wheel and pedal setup that I have. It's a nice way to have a nice system that won't break the bank. And I think they're over $300 brand new. We got ours secondhand. If you look out there, your secondary electronics markets, you can probably find one for a little bit less of a cost. And it's going to be a little bit better than your your typical Xbox or PlayStation or PC gaming wheel. They're also compatible with those as well, though. So if you want a wheel that also works with your Xbox or PlayStation, the Logitech system is a nice all-around solution. The wheel also has pedals and customizable buttons on it, so you can map them out to be whatever you want. So if you have specific adjustable settings in your car, like brake bias, things like that, you can map all the buttons and the paddles to do exactly what you want to do. So they generally all come with that. Some come with more buttons than others, but they've usually got some configuration of controls and even just directional pads to help you navigate the menus in iRacing, so that you're not having to constantly shift over to a keyboard and mouse while you're racing. So a good option there that we would recommend. At the higher end, you do have the systems like Fanatec's direct drive wheel and pedal setups. These do a really great job of replicating what you have in an actual race car. They're just that much better. The force feedback is stronger. The wheels are more like what you would actually see in a race car. They're removable. The pedals look more like actual race car pedals, and they feel more like actual race car pedals in the way that they're actually built. So just a little bit more realistic experience, but it is going to be a step up in price. But that's another option if you're ready to make that move. The nice thing with the wheels and pedal combos is that if you have a rig, you can swap out whatever wheel and pedal combo you want. They generally, if it's one of the bigger name, more common brands like the Logitech, Thrustmaster, or Fanatec systems, generally the rigs that you're going to buy are going to support those common systems. Anything you buy is going to support that Logitech G29 series system. Anything's going to support Fanatec, because they know that that's what people are most likely going to want to buy, and so they've made sure that the mounting locations for everything on the frame is going to work with those particular products. Now let's talk about wheel stands and cockpits. You need something to attach those wheel and pedal combos to. As I said before, you can spend $20,000 if you want, but we'll talk about some of the less pricey options today that can get you started without breaking the bank. If you've decided that you no longer want to clamp your Xbox wheel to your desk, you can either start with a simple wheel stand or move to a full frame cockpit. Wheel stands allow you to mount your wheel and pedals to a stand but not provide a seat. This option will lower the cost. You can get a good wheel stand for starting maybe around $100, and that has some advantages in that it takes up the least amount of space, and also is obviously the cheapest way to get started. But if you want a full rig with a racing seat, you can still find those starting at about $230 from a number of manufacturers. We've got a few listed here. A quick search on Amazon will bring up a number of options, such as the ones here and then maybe some other ones. There are some low-cost options available if you want to import something from China. I'll tell you right now, you may not see a brand name on it, and there's a good chance it's going to come without any assembly instructions. But there are some, if you want to get the price down to closer to $200, there are some folks out there that'll sell you something. But you can get a decent set, you know, around $250 to start. You may also want to have your you know, PC and your monitors mounted directly to your rig, and there's mounting options available for those as well. Some people just have a PC sitting next to the rig, but I've seen some setups where they have a little arm that comes out that they can mount the keyboard to, and things like that. The big one though is going to be your screens, your monitors. You can get standalone monitor stands that aren't connected to your frame, so that you can upgrade those later, or you can get simulator rigs, simulator frames that have the monitor mount built in, if you want to keep everything as one piece. If you want to get a separate monitor stand, you can get them for around $100 for a single monitor, maybe a smaller size monitor, and then as you decide you want to have more monitors and bigger screens, it's going to go up from there. A lot of people will do the triple monitor stand option, but some now are starting to go to the single monitor that has the curvature to it, the curved. I know Samsung makes some of these. I'm starting to see more and more of these ultra wide aspect ratio curved monitors as an option if you really just want to have one monitor. They still give you a little bit of that wraparound feel. I wanted to spend a minute to mention one other option as well, because this was, I didn't go this way, but this was something that I thought was very attractive when I first started looking into it, and that was Next Level Racing's modular option. You can basically start with a $250 wheel stand. That's a very good wheel stand. But what's cool about this one is that you can add on to it. You can essentially buy the wheel frame, or I'm sorry, excuse me, the seat frame and the seat separately, bolt on your other attachments like your shifter mounts and things like that, your monitor mounts. You can add all that later. You can buy it piece by piece and build it up as you go. To get the entire setup all at once is about an $800 setup, but being able to do it slowly means you can get a nicer rig without having to you know, either put it on your credit card or have to drop all the money at once. So you can kind of do it as you go. And you know, if for some reason you're not able to afford the upgrades, you don't have to do it. So I think that's a really great option if you want something like that in the end, but you can't afford it right now. If you don't mind spending $250 for a wheel stand, it's a good way to allow yourself to eventually upgrade later. And these even support motion rigs. They've got a couple different options for motion systems. One's a $3,000 option, one's a $6,000 option. So obviously you're getting into a lot more money once you decide to do that. But again, for a $250 investment, considered a down payment, you can eventually work your way up to it. Just about every other system out there, if you decide you want something better, it's start from scratch. You got to get rid of the old system and get a whole new one in. This one lets you grow with it a little bit. So I like that personally. That might be something you want to consider as well. So what if you don't want to look at flat screen monitors? What if you really want to feel like you're in that car? That's where virtual reality comes in. iRacing supports both the Oculus and the HTC Vive VR systems. Personally, the Oculus Rift has been the one that's been recommended to me. I have a friend who's really into VR and he's used a lot of the different options, and he told me that for something like this, the Oculus Rift would be the one to go with. That system is going to run you, I think, a little over $400 as of the time I'm recording this. The Rift S is the latest and greatest from Oculus. Personally, I found a secondhand Oculus Rift, a later version of the original series. So we were able to save a little money. Again, check out your secondary electronics resellers. Maybe you can find a deal on a later model now that there's newer ones out. You might be able to find an older one. You know, either one probably, you know, works just fine, but we use an Oculus. Here's the minimum system requirements for each system. They're pretty similar, but there are some differences. So depending on which one you get, make sure that you have a system that'll support that. You definitely don't want to spend a lot of money on the VR system and then have it look worse than what you had to begin with. So keep in mind, this is one of those areas where you probably want to spend the money to get the proper equipment. Don't you know, cut corners on this, because the VR equipment itself is too expensive to not get your money's worth out of it. So here's TSquare Racing. We put together a low-cost rig. We went ahead and got a open wheeler frame. We got the full rig, so we didn't get a modular system. Got the racing seat that I was sitting in at the earlier part of the video. We also went ahead and got a 4-inch riser set for this seat. That was a little extra money, but it gets you off the floor. But some people will just put it up on you know, if they've got a pallet or something like that, or they can build something out of wood to make their own riser if you want to save some money. We also got it with these harnesses so that I could strap in and actually feel like I was in the car. I think that was worth it as well, personally for me. Of course, we got it in TSquare Racing red and black. We had to get the color scheme right. As far as the wheel stand and the pedal set that we have here, this all mounts to the seat. I have it apart here just so it's easier to get in the camera. I had the secondhand Logitech G Series wheel, and then these are the pedals, and then it also came with the gear shift that just mounts. There's a mount point on the other side of this wheel here that gets to, so it's right about where it needs to be in the car, and you can adjust all of this. The seat reclines, and you can change the distance between your feet and the seat, and the height of everything, and the angle of the wheel, so you can really get it to match whatever car it is that you want to drive. So this has been a very good setup for us. The seat itself, when all of the options, was I think about $450, about $456 I think was what I looked up when I went to see what we spent on it. The secondhand Logitech equipment was about $180. So we got a pretty decent full cockpit system here for well under $1,000. And as we said before, you can get cheaper than that. You don't. That's more than you have to spend. We didn't have to get the belts and the riser and the full seat. You can use an office chair. There's ways to do it for a lot less, but this is what we went with, and I'm pretty happy with what we got for the price that we paid for it. One thing that I'll mention as we're talking about this setup is that this particular wheel mount, you'll see has a single support beam. So this goes between your legs when you're using these pedals. If you're someone who is a heel-toe downshifter, this is going to get in the way. This is going to make it very difficult. At least it does for me. Maybe it's a personal thing depending on your size, but for me, I really can't do any heel-toe shifting with this because it's just my ankle hits this when I'm trying to move my foot from pedal to pedal. So if that's something you want, the nicer, the little more expensive systems will put those supports on the outside of the wheels, or outside of your legs, excuse me. And that'll work a little bit better for you if that's your style of driving, but that's all a personal preference. If you don't mind that, you can save a little money going with a setup like this. So that's really all there is to it. I hope this helped you figure out what you want in your setup. Maybe we'll see you in a virtual race in the future. If you decide to build your own setup, or if you already have one, let us know what direction you went and what you think about it. Are you happy with what you did? Would you change anything about it? Is there something you plan on doing next? What's your next upgrade you want to do to it? We'd like to know that. So let us know. Thanks for watching this video today, and we'll see you on the next virtual lab.